last week we were covering one of my favorite pranayama techniques, which is belly breathing. And this week we're going to be covering a yoga tip. So this is something that I think a lot of people, especially early on, whenever they're practicing yoga, don't necessarily think about, and I know I certainly didn't. But when it was revealed to me, actually just a few months ago, it kind of was like an eye-opening experience, and it totally propelled my practice forward. So what we're going to be covering today is hip alignment in forward folds. So oftentimes what I see when teaching, and also what I used to do whenever I was forward folding, is that we do this thing where we just kind of lean forward and we reach, and we try to get our heads to our knees, and it just doesn't work. I know I did this for years, like way back even whenever I was dancing in high school and doing stretching, and then through the early part of my yoga practice, that I would do this. And I noticed that I just was never making any progress. Every time I tried to do a forward fold, I felt like I was never getting anywhere. Like the progress was so minimal, and I couldn't understand why. Like especially back when I was dancing, I was like, why am I not more flexible than this? But instead of doing that, what I learned, what was like shown to me a few months ago, is that if we actually focus more on our hip alignment and moving our hips and our torsos rather than focusing on that reaching motion and getting our heads to our knees, it actually works out a lot better. And I've been able to see a lot of progress finally in my practice just by doing that minor adjustment in my thinking and in the way that I put my body into a forward fold. So that's what we're going to be going over today. I'm hoping that this is going to be something that is kind of simple, but it's something that I think just a lot of us don't think about whenever we do forward folds. So I'm going to be covering 3 variations. So the first is a standing forward fold, the second is going to be a seated forward fold, and then downward dog. So let's get started.
Okay, so if you're practicing with me, go ahead and come to your mat and start by just putting your feet hip distance apart like I'm doing here. And like I said, what typically happens is that we just lean forward and reach, try to get our heads to our knees, and nothing really happens. Frustrating. So instead, what we're going to do is, you can actually place your hands on your hip and do this with me, is bend from the hip as we go down. Make sure that you bend your knees a little bit and then place your hands on the floor. And think about bringing your stomach closer to your thighs. You might even bend your knees enough to make your belly touch. And then once you are there, then you can let your head rest and kind of fall loose. Another thing that you can do if this feels like a struggle or just is tense in your back is actually to practice this as a flat back. So come into flat back, your chest is going to come out directly in front of you. Think about opening up the chest. And you can use blocks as well on whichever height works for you, just to kind of give yourself a little bit of an extra boost here. And again, opening the chest up, letting the head come up, and feeling that sensation of the stomach coming closer to the thighs. And once you have whatever variation works for you, take a few minutes to take a few breaths and just stay here and feel what it's like to bend from the hip. And once you're all done, come up one vertebra at a time, taking a big inhale and exhale to hands to heart center. And we'll go to the next one, which is a seated forward fold. So again, people tend to just reach for the toes, try to put their head to their knees, and again, it's not working. Instead, what we want to do is first, before we even forward fold, is to actually push the hips up and bring them back, the thigh bones back into the hips. You can do this by either picking yourself up like I just did, or you can just scoot your hips back one at a time, plugging the thigh bones into the hips. Once you've got that, put your hands on the mat and sit up nice and tall with an inhale. What I like to do is actually inhale both arms up nice and tall, and then exhale again, bending from the hip, leaning forward and reaching for my toes. Or if that's not accessible, just place your hands on your thighs, whichever is totally fine. And again, we're thinking about bringing the stomach to the thighs. And instead of trying to get your head down to your knees, bring your head up and open the chest up nice and big. Let your head be free for movement. And again, once you have it, stay for a few breaths. With each inhale, feel your back elongating and stretching out. And then with each exhale, see if you can fold over just a little bit farther. Our breath can be a really powerful tool here. And then finally, we'll move into downward dog. So the same thing happens. People come into this and they don't think about that bending from the hip motion, and they have a rounded back. You can see that in my back here. So instead, you can actually place your hand on your hip like I do here and bend from the hip, bringing the stomach closer to the thighs. It's not going to actually touch, obviously, but just think about getting it as close as it'll go. Also think about internally rotating your thighs and opening up the backs of your thighs. That's going to help bring some space into that area. You also want to push the mat away nice and hard, opening up the shoulder blades on the back. I'm also showing you here, whenever you're in downward dog, you want to internally rotate your arms, opening up the armpits so they face the mat. And that's going to open your chest up nice and wide and allow you to get your chest a little bit closer to your legs.
Okay guys, so that's it. I hope that was pretty easy to follow, and that it's something that, like I said, is minor, but hopefully will give you some insight into just some body placement, and hopefully it'll be able to take your practice, just like mine, into a place where it can progress, especially if you're struggling with forward folds. So let me know in the comments below if it was helpful, if it made sense, and if you have any questions for me. I'm always happy to communicate with you guys and continue this beyond just the video that I record. And I will see you back here in 2 weeks for another video in the Wellness with Kelly series. So hope you have a fabulous day, and I will see you then.